Welcome to the Get Fit Guys quick and dirty tips to get moving and shape up. My name is Brock Armstrong, and I'm the Get Fit Guy. In a previous Get Fit Guy episode called Should You Exercise While Sick?, I looked at how hard it can be to do, much of anything when you're feeling under the weather. I also took a brief look at whether there are benefits to exercising while sick, or if working out just makes you feel worse. Well, in this podcast episode, I am going to revisit some of those topics and take a deeper look at some other aspects of exercise and illness with my special guest expert, Dr. Jake Deutsch. Now, Dr. Jake is board certified in emergency medicine and the co-founder of Cure Urgent Care in New York City. He attended the University of Massachusetts Medical School and currently holds privileges in the Mount Sinai Health System. Prior to founding Cure Urgent Care, he practiced emergency medicine at Hackensack Medical Center and was ranked highest in patient care and satisfaction, more than a few times. With over 15 years of urgent care experience, Dr. Deutsch is a highly skilled practitioner dedicated to keeping his patients happy and healthy. Now, Dr. Jake is also very active on social media with tons of followers on Instagram, where, with just one look, you'll find out that this doctor knows a thing or two about how to stay fit. Now, he also regularly appears on several American television networks as a trusted medical source, and recently he partnered with Zicam to help people get better sooner this cold season. Now, before I get into the interview, I just want to tell you about an online survey that was done by 2,000 Americans, and I'll link to the press release in the show notes for this episode. And that survey showed that people have seen this cold season as different from past cold seasons. More than 50% of the people surveyed said that they were researching how to be better prepared for the upcoming cold season compared to prior cold seasons, and nearly a quarter of the people surveyed reported that they're responsibly stocking up on remedies. Now, with his facilities seeing more than 4,500 patients a month, Dr. Deutsch truly understands the internal struggle between acknowledging symptoms and taking initiative versus simply riding it out. So, given the ever-present confusion between cold, flu, and allergy symptoms, Dr. Deutsch really wants people to understand how to recognize sneezes, sore throats, and coughs, and jump into action at the first sign of a cold. And part of responding to a cold includes tailoring your workout and your exercise program. All right, so let's jump into the interview. But first, this interview was sponsored by Zicam Nasal All Clear. Zicam Nasal All Clear keeps your nose clean, clear, and healthy so you can perform at your best when you work out. You can find it on Amazon. Just search for Zicam, that's Zicam Nasal All Clear. Now, on to my interview with Dr. Jake Deutsch. So we can really just jump right into the first question, which is kind of the holy grail, I guess, of us fitness people when it comes to cold and flu season is, can I actually use my fitness to boost my immune system, or at least give myself a more of a fighting chance of staying nice and healthy during the cold and flu season?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's just everybody's assumption. When you're physically fit, you're healthier. And part of being healthy is having a robust immune system. So it kind of goes hand in hand without saying, but, sort of understanding the real science behind it versus, just making that assumption is definitely, it's got some nuances to it.
Yeah, I bet.
So, I always encourage my patients, try to exercise as much as possible. It has so many valuable benefits, and certainly keeping our immune system at its optimal is one of the most interesting.
So in terms of the sort of science behind it, can you give us a little more of information about that without getting too sciencey on us?
Yeah, try to not make people fall asleep.
Exactly.
But I think like the number one point to consider is our hormones that regulate stress in our body. Exercise actually reduces the release of stress hormones. So some of those, like cortisol, which are, what our body releases because we're not taking care of ourselves, are decreased in production when we exercise. So that's really, I think, the biggest regulatory mechanism. And so by reducing those hormones, the body has less sort of inflammatory response, and then the immune system is ready to do what it needs to do. So that's kind of, I think, the most important and really scientifically documented benefit of exercise. But yeah, there's a handful of other ones that we see incidentally too. So I'm glad to jump into those.
That's really interesting. So it's more that you're sort of getting those hormones out of the way so the immune system can do its job rather than bolstering the immune system. Did I understand that right?
Yeah, it's almost like preventing unnecessary inflammation, which overworks the immune system, if you will. So, we've all kind of thought about endorphins that are released because of exercise, and those have a positive effect on our mood and
Yeah.
energy. But, when we are not taking care of ourselves, the stress hormones are higher. So the idea is keep those down, get a better immune response. So it's not so obvious. And endocrinology is probably one of the most difficult aspects of medicine. So I think that that's the best way to kind of summarize it and keep it simple.
Okay. So, a little while back, you actually said that you try to encourage your patients to exercise as much as possible.
Mhm.
Now, is there a benefit to doing so? Like, let's say they're used to doing 30 minutes of exercise. Would you want them to increase it to 60 or 90? Of course, I'm being a bit of a devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
Is there a tipping point?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, anything in excess is never good. So once you start going beyond the healthy amounts of exercise where your body can recuperate and is able to, sort of be balanced, then you start putting more stress on the body. And so that idea of those stress hormones being positively reduced with a good amount of exercise, the flip side is excessive amount of exercise could increase those stress hormones. And, that's really where the balance I was speaking about comes in. I think that anything in excess is never good, whether it's exercise or drinking or diet. And, there's a lot of people who are really fit and are almost fanatical about it. And you have to be careful. Our body needs sleep to recover. We need to break down in order to build up. So that's seen in the physical parts of our exercise, but also in the non-physical parts like our immune system. So, I just always want to make sure that people don't think that you can't get enough of a good thing when it comes to things like exercise, because of course, you don't want to be running on fumes, burning the candle on both ends, if you will, which of course is not going to end up being positive.
So that includes taking those all important recovery days and rest days, as well as getting your exercise days in, I expect.
Yes. So, my training is in emergency medicine, and some of the most extreme cases of illness come into the ER. And as an example, rhabdomyolysis, which is the breakdown of muscle tissue from overuse, would be an example of that. So we see that in soldiers that are marching or ravers that are, partying all night and doing drugs, so they don't have their muscles are just working and working, and you actually get muscle breakdown from the excessive exercise. So, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. And just like rhabdomyolysis would be an example of that, overdoing it, you're going to have the negative effect of the immune system. And, wintertime is when our body is most at risk for infections, for illness. And, we want to optimize what that looks like for our immunity.
Okay. So we want to make sure that we're getting enough exercise, but not too much. We're getting enough rest, but still making time for the exercise to make sure, or to give us the best chance of not getting sick in the first place. But once we've already gotten sick, let's say we've got some congestion, sore throat, all of that kind of stuff happening, how can that actually impact our not necessarily just our fitness performance, but actually like our ability to get the exercise done?
Right, of course. So the body is a balance between our cardiovascular system, our pulmonary system, our circulatory system, also other things like our immune and musculoskeletal system. So, when you're sick, you're going to basically have the systems not firing at maximum capacity. So,
Right.
just being sick from a cold, you'll have fever and what we call cytokine response, where there's these modulators that get into our body that cause us to feel crummy. But the other manifestations, the respiratory, like if you get pneumonia, you're not going to be able to absorb as much oxygen. Or if you have other severe illnesses and you're not able to circulate blood as well, like you're anemic or you have other problems, you're going to, see the effects that exercise certainly wouldn't be able to be performed to capacity. So, listening to your body is such a simple mindset, but when you're sick, it's even more important because you really might be limited from what you're used to. Elite athletes can, go from elite status to needing to be benched because of illness. So it's really important to get that whole picture when it comes to taking care of yourself when you're sick. And certainly, a little bit of exercise when you have a mild cold, I don't mind sweating it out. But when there's something more significant going on, heeding your body's warnings, being smart about what you need to do to take care of yourself is 100% what I recommend to my patients.
Do you follow that recommendation of like what they call the neck check? If you're sick from the neck up, it's okay to exercise, but if it's the neck down, is there any validity to that?
I like that. That's kind of clever. But, you could have meningitis and that's above the neck, and then you're not really going to be in good shape to be working out. So I don't think it's an absolute, but, it's probably a decent rule of thumb. Really, I think the biggest thing is anything that's respiratory is going to be much more prohibitive, like that's really where the gas exchange is. That's critical to our cardiovascular system. So it's stuff that's going on in the lungs that's going to be really your danger zone to be thinking about.
So if you've got that wheeze or that cough or just difficulty breathing, then take it easy.
Take it easy. Yeah. It's funny. I see so many patients that, are really into fitness. I live in New York City. I myself am very active, working out 5 or 6 days a week. And they always are like, so I'm good to go, right? When they're feeling sick. And it's okay to take time off. You've been training hard all year. If, you have 1 or 2 illnesses a year where you need to take a week off, that's okay. I think that really has to be an expected course of the year, especially when you're not 20. As we mature, our bodies need a little bit more time to recover.
I like how you said that. As we mature.
Yeah.
As someone who's sneaking up on 50, I appreciate that language.
Me too. Yeah. So, but there's no reason not to be able to be active. I certainly am highly encourage my patients to, take care of themselves and exercise. And with the pandemic, we've seen so many people become couch potatoes, which is a slippery slope of, kind of staying at home and not taking care of yourself and being depressed by everything that's happening into the world. So we need to make sure that we're being smart, but also not discouraging people from continuing to do what we know is very, very positive.
Right. And at this point, when we're recording this episode, it's mid-January 2021. So not only do we have the pandemic, but it's also the middle of winter in the Northern Hemisphere anyway. And I know there's lots of questions about exercising outdoors during the winter, but from an actual physician, can you let the listeners know in terms of exercising outdoors in cold temperatures, is that going to hurt you health-wise?
I don't think hurt, but it's a certain set of circumstances, additional layer of circumstances. So in the Northeast, we have some really frigid temperatures. And I guess, most critical factor is making sure that our body acclimates to that and our respiratory system is protected. So, I like to kind of think of like our nose as the entry point into our respiratory system. Our nose is responsible for filtering our air, sort of humidifying the air, and making sure that the temperatures are regulated. So, being aware of your nose and how sort of your nasal status is kind of a key factor. So I'm a big fan of Zicam. They make the nasal all clear swabs, which, basically are a way to maintain the nasal passages in an optimal setting. And so, getting your airway prepared to work out outside is like my always go-to. And then, it's possible to adjust with other, factors, like whether it's your head covering or, sort of water wicking clothing, or, just taking extra precautions because there's still sun in the winter, so using sunscreen. But the foundation is good airway, making sure that you're going to be able to tolerate the colder temperatures with the respiratory system, which I mentioned was so important, and then adding on those other layers. The one thing that I love about my secret weapon, the nasal swabs from Zicam, is they just are using menthol, which is what we use typically for other respiratory treatments. And it's very cooling. It opens up the passages, and maximizing that airflow is going to maximize our workout. So something very simple that I always make sure is in my gym bag and recommend to my patients.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Actually, I when I used to ride my bike to work in the middle of winter and snow minus 20 Celsius or colder, I'd wear a complete balaclava over my face.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a little tiny mesh part right in front of my nose. And yeah, as soon as your nose starts to get kind of stuffed up, that little mesh part becomes completely, for lack of a better term, encrusted with ice and other things.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it can really turn your bike ride from being kind of a fun adventure to a torturous affair.
Yeah. Once you go from open nasal passages to blocked, you're no longer really able to do what you set out to do. So that's where it should sort of be the first point of preparing for outdoor exercise and when it's cold like that.
Gotcha. Okay, well, in the spirit of that, then, with the Quick and Dirty Tips Network, and especially on my show, I love to wrap things up all the time with a little bit of homework, or at least some tips that the listeners can use right away. So, for those folks who are out there right now and they want to really take charge of their winter exercise and still be able to protect their health, what would your tips be?
First of all, be realistic. If you haven't been working out, don't go try to run a marathon tomorrow. Start with reasonable goals and set goals. It's still kind of the new year, having some sort of plan that's reasonably attainable. Once you start to hit goals, the success seems to be much more positive and more productive. So make sure that you got some sort of realistic goals going on. Think about ways that you're going to make your workouts creative. So, don't just say, I'm going to cycle, I'm going to do, an indoor bike because I got a new bike. Burnout is probably going to set in after a couple of weeks. So have a plan in place to have variety. Make sure that you have had your annual physical. So some way to, either telemedicine or otherwise with your doctor, because everybody is kind of not paying attention to the health maintenance that you probably need and want to make sure. And then, get stocked up. The sunscreen I mentioned before, people don't think about it. Make sure you have masks that are great to use for outdoor activity if you need them, gear that is appropriate. And then, of course, I'm going to go back to my secret weapon, some Zicam nasal all clear, get it stocked away. So then when you do have one of those days where your nose is stuffed up, you can open up your airways and get to work out.
And if you're feeling a little under the weather and you still want to get a workout in,
moderation.
What would be the just stay moderate and make sure that your lungs are clear?
Yeah, stay moderate. Make sure that you're not having anything that is, saying, this doesn't feel right. Like you should still be able to do what you would expect. So body, sort of telling you that it's not in its ideal performance, listen to it. That's okay. We should be listening to our bodies. But of course, we want to continue to encourage people to get active, have some positive fitness goals, because we are going to get out of this pandemic. We are going to be back in the beach before you know it. We are going to want to spend time with our family and our kids and get all the benefits of being on top of our health. So we don't want that to fall to the wayside now as much as any other time.
There you go. You heard it here first, folks. Dr. Jake says we are going to get through this.
Oh, well, yeah, we definitely are.
All right. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for joining me on the Get Fit Guy podcast today. And if people want to reach out to you or find some more information about you, where's the best place to find you?
I'm pretty active on social media at Dr. Jake Deutsch, DR, not doctor like Dr. Dre, but DR as in a physician. And it's I'm on Instagram. So if you are scrolling through and you want to look me up, glad to share information. And of course, nowadays, direct messages, emails, we're all about transparency and trying to communicate with people. So glad to help out.
Perfect. Well, keep up the good work, and thanks again for joining us on the podcast.
My pleasure.
All right. One more big thank you to Dr. Jake for coming on the Get Fit Guy podcast today to, well, set us straight on things we should be doing when we're sick and still want to get a workout. So thank you, Dr. Jake Deutsch. Now, my name is Brock Armstrong. I'm the Get Fit Guy, asking you, what are you waiting for? Get out there and listen to your body.